Say more about the sorcery thing.
Yeah, many people think it as a very negative, very dark, which actually most people don't understand that. You need the dark because you have the light, you have the yin and the yang. They're both. But we tend as human beings to put a label on it saying, oh, it's this white magic or this dark magic or the wizard or this or that. But everything is source. Every thought you have, every breath you take, every fish in the ocean, every bird in the sky, and every universe there is comes from source. And so we're all sorcerers because we can bring that through us, but we don't know it as a species. But we source everything in our life, we source. But again, we think we have no power when we're extraordinarily powerful as sorcerers.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan Show. It's where we blend spirituality and practicality to help you live a life of purpose and joy. We have Jim Fortin with us on the show today. Jim combines brain-based science, transformational psychology, and ancient wisdom to help people manifest their dreams. I'm eager to hear how Jim combines these modalities and about the results his clients are experiencing. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with your family and friends. Now let's go talk with Jim. Jim, welcome to the show. I'm so delighted you could join us today.
Julie, thank you for having me, and I'm excited to be here today. I know we're going to talk about a lot of things that a lot of your listeners are really going to enjoy listening to and absorbing.
Sounds good. You help people become a cosmic being. What's that mean?
Well, we all are that, and I'm surprised you knew that because we're not using that so much anymore. But we're all cosmic beings, but it's the awareness of that beingness, because I talk a whole lot about being. We as human beings have become human doings. We've lost ourselves, and a large part of what I talk about in transformation goes back to being. The way that we be is the genesis for everything we create in life. So I spend a lot of time in that little sandbox talking about being and what it means.
So what's a cosmic being to you, though?
You, me, we're all part of the cosmos. I mean, we are all in this container of this particular universe. There are multiverses, but we're in this particular universe, and we are cosmic beings. Your listeners will have no problems with this, I'm sure, is that we don't die. The physical body, actually, your space and point in this existence now will cease to exist, but we never die. We literally exist in the cosmos. So that's what I mean by cosmic being, is having that awareness that you are an infinite cosmic energy.
Okay. I agree. I call that spirit. Yeah. Just it's interesting, Jim, because lots of terms of cosmic and cosmos and that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of people just think of aliens and different galaxies and things like that. And it's way broader than that, in my opinion. I'd love to hear your take on this, but it's our spirit is infinite and it's not restricted by different galaxies or different incarnations. It's many different experiences, all helping that spirit expand. Do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I do. And I want to add here, let me back up a little further. You're the only person, which is interesting in a good way, that's brought it to my attention like that. There's a reason that I had many years ago actually applied for the trademark for cosmic being for marketing purposes. But here's the thing. So many people use the word spiritual, and so many people don't understand the word spiritual. Many people think that spiritual means religious as well. Spiritual teachers, but they're preachers of Christianity. Well, many people, what I have found, I've worked with a real shaman, not somebody who calls himself a shaman, a real shaman for almost 3 decades. And what I've noticed over the years in life, and even people working with him, is many people will consider themselves to be spiritualists, but they turn spiritualism into dogmatic religion. It's the religion of that spirituality. So even when we hear the word spiritual, people have a connotation and a human identity about that. I'm spiritual, I'm not spiritual. And that's why I chose cosmic, because that is infinite, whereas spirituality can be dogmatized. That's why I did that.
Yeah, I love it. How do you tell a real shaman from a fake shaman?
Well, real shamans, most people will never find. And that's a great question. I'm asked that a lot as well. There are many people out there right now saying, oh, I'm a shaman. I heard somebody say they're a money shaman and this kind of shaman and that kind of shaman. There are many people who practice shamanism, which is the oldest system of thought on this particular planet. And there are many people who practice shamanism and they will call themselves a shaman, but they're not a shaman. A shaman, a real shaman, is someone who's learned to transcend all physicality, all awareness of physicality, and they can merge with pure spirit cosmically. And you'd mentioned aliens, and I know it's not far-fetched for this podcast. My brother-in-law is this shaman, my sister's husband. I am aware of many, many, many hundreds of instances of him connecting with higher intelligences that are not on this planet, but they're all, to your word, all spiritual.
Can you give us an example of something that really caught your attention and made you ponder, okay, there's really way more to the story here than meets the eye with what's going on?
I can give you 100, but I'll give you the first one in 1996. We used to go every spring equinox to a power vortex on the planet and do ceremony for 2 days. My family has been allowed inside the King's Chamber of Cheops. We've been inside Teotihuacan. We have been to Uluru, Machu Picchu, twice, Isla del Sol, etc., Chaco Canyon. And when we were in Chichen Itza in 1996, I was young. I mean, I'm younger than I am now. I was probably 31. And I had a whole lot of tequila to drink the night before we went in Mexico. And we're driving to, actually it's Tulum, not Chichen Itza. And he's sitting behind me in the van and he's energetically working on me. And everyone in the van is quiet. And I said to myself, I just did not speak it, but I said to myself, I feel so bad, I'm going to leave my body until we get there. Now, I have no idea why I said that. And he tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, get back in your body. There's time for that later. And in that moment, I knew that he could see me energetically as opposed to just thinking about it physically. And in that moment, I knew there was something unseen, ethereal, energetic that he could do that I wanted to start learning to do. So that was my first experience of at least something relatable that would be translating the ethereal into the physical.
Yeah. Yeah. And I get to see that all day, every day when I'm working with clients. It's so much fun. But that was your first encounter, it sounds like, with him. Okay, this guy's legit in what he's talking about.
Yeah. Well, to share the story with you, there was a very famous story written in the 60s called The Teachings of Don Juan by Carlos Castaneda. Castaneda was not the original student. He's never met Don Juan. He recounted the books through what was given to him by the actual apprentice of Don Juan, which was my brother-in-law, who grew up in Mexico and started apprenticing with Don Juan when he was a little boy. So a lot of people, I remember talking to Wayne Dyer about this many years ago because Wayne Dyer asked me to meet my brother-in-law. And Wayne told a story one time back in the 90s about be careful what you believe because when the truth comes knocking, you won't recognize it. And when I told Wayne all this, he's like, I will go anywhere, anytime, any place to meet your brother-in-law. We've all been conditioned, and even I did before I met him, conditioned to believe, oh, this is the truth. Carlos Castaneda wrote these, but he didn't write them. He was simply the purveyor or the conveyor of what was given to him.
Tell everybody who's unfamiliar with Don Juan, tell them why he was so special.
Well, Don Juan was a Yaqui sorcerer. He lived in Mexico, a real physical being. He lived till about 105 years old. He was really old when he transitioned off the planet. And he was a sorcerer in Mexico. Carlos Castaneda was a grad student, I believe, at UCLA, working on a dissertation, he went to Mexico to find a sorcerer who understood peyote. And so he ran into a lady, I've never mentioned this on any other podcast, a lady named Connie Mendez, who's also a metaphysician who lived in Oaxaca, Mexico. And so Connie Mendez knew my brother-in-law, Javier at the point, as a boy, and she knew Carlos Castaneda. Carlos asked, Connie, can you introduce me to Javier to introduce me to Don Juan? So then Javier said, well, let me ask Don Juan. Don Juan said, no, he's not on my path. You can talk to him all you want, but I will not meet with him. So that's the story behind the scenes. But Don Juan was a sorcerer in Mexico who did all white magic and a healer.
You say you utilize brain-based science, transformational psychology, and ancient wisdom to help people manifest the life of their dreams. That's quite a combo platter there, Jim. I want to hear about how it all comes together, what your journey has been, how you got to that, and just explain how it works to us.
I think you and a lot of listeners will understand this in that many of us, we live in the 3D world physically, and we all, many times we'll look at life and go, well, how did I get here? What happened? What created this? So how I got here was all by divine management. I mean, I couldn't have planned this 30 years ago. So what happened is I started working with Don Javier in 1996. And it took me all the spiritual path, all the sorcery and the shamanism and all these kind of things that I've been on that path for decades now. But he quite often talks about physics, quantum mechanics, things that, are physics, I'll put it that way. And he's taken me even beyond things that physics understands. And I'm like, I want to talk to people about this. My interest is spirituality and spiritual evolution, but I want to concretize it because many people think a word that you used, many people think that spirituality is woo-woo. And it's not, it's physics. I don't normally have it on my desk, but I have this book on my desk, which is the only book Don Javier told me about, called The Kabbalion, which was written about 120 years ago. But the manuscript is believed to have been written by Hermes Trismegistus thousands of years ago. I'm curious, have you heard of the Kabbalion?
I haven't. No, I just wrote it down. I'm going to check it out.
7 cosmic laws. And the first cosmic law is that the universe is mental. The universe is mind. Now, I can tell people that all day long, and I'm still answering your question here. But how do you concretize that? How do you make it to somebody that might be an analytical thinker, a cerebral thinker, a scientific thinker? How do you concretize the universe is mental? Well, there's all kind of research in physics now, like the double slit experiment, which demonstrates that. So I take the spirituality and I literally match it up with corresponding physics, which is the physics part of it and the science part of it. But the brain part of it is mind and brain. People confuse mind and brain. They're not the same thing. The brain is organic. It's biological. The brain is the medium for mind, universal consciousness, or mind. So then I talk about a lot of brain-based applications, but the science behind the brain. So like habits, on my own podcast, I did an episode recently on addiction. And we think addiction's all psychological for the most part. I mean, we know it's also chemical, but what drives all of that? What are the energies that drives all of that? And it's mind. And actually, we can use the mind to control the brain. But for most of us, we let the brain control the mind because it happens neurologically, which is research has shown. And so we live by what we learn as habits, and the brain controls us, but brain is all 3D, and we have to move over to mind. Now, the ancient wisdom part, I talk about shamanism and ancient wisdom, a lot of it, and I just somehow mixed it all together over the years, and it works. So how I did it, couldn't tell you. It was just, all just happened.
Yeah, where you were inspired, obviously. You were led. I live in the deep South. They would say you were led, darling.
That's exactly. Well, I'm careful with because I'm usually not on podcasts like yours, this one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people will say, well, I don't know. I was led. It's my dharma. It's why I'm on the planet. And why do I have these gifts? And why can I take them and put them together? I don't know. I didn't flunk. I made a D. I made an A in every college course, but I made a D in college biology. It's not my jam, but I understand it. So if I can take people in what I call the 3D world, and I can help them understand more of the ethereal, then I feel like I've done my job. So I've been very hyper-vigilant about how can I merge them so we can understand it, but to gain bigger perspective on ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I agree. And that's the work that I do too, especially with the medical intuition and energy healing. I see in my mind's eye these images and analogies that oftentimes will emulate surgical procedures and other procedures. And it's to give us a human frame of reference for this, what I call woo-woo, that it's the energy healing. And I have a dear friend who's a Taoist priest named San Jing, and he says that Wu is the Chinese word for source.
Energy, source.
Right. Yeah. And so I laugh and I say, well, I'm always led to use the word woo-woo because it is source and it's also fun. So it disarms people. I go, oh, I don't believe in all this stuff. I go, that's fine. You don't have to believe in it, whatever. But it's woo-woo and it's a lot of fun. And so I've come to really enjoy using that a lot. I want to go back.
Let me add there before you go on. Have you ever heard of Gary Zukav?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Gary's a good personal friend of mine. Number one, I want to introduce you.
Okay, great.
And his book, the first book he wrote was called The Dancing Wu Li Masters.
That's right. I read all his books.
Energy. And Gary told me that when he wrote The Dancing Wu Li Masters in 1979, he took it and he wrote it on a legal pad. And he threw it in the trash. And he's like, no. And he literally pulled it out of the trash and finished. And I think it was he's got like 4 New York Times bestsellers. And he was on Oprah 36 times.
That's where I first learned about him was Oprah back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's all spirit-led and it's all physics, but woo is energy. And that's how, I just remember that story because Gary told me that. But after we're done today, I'll make a note. I'll introduce you to Gary.
I'd love that.
You guys can do whatever you want to do.
That would be great. Back to the sorcery thing. Sorcery, I think, has a negative connotation to a lot of people in our world, and it's not negative. It's part of the whole healing thing. I think of Merlin the magician, in the Camelot and the King Arthur, Arthurian legend and all of that. And I think that I believe there have been sorcerers since the beginning of time, and it became edited when probably in the mid 1800s or so, when the natural healers were being squashed, the witches burned at the stake, and even before they were in late 1700s, early 1800s. as we were going more into allopathic medicine. Say more about the sorcery thing, just so that our listeners have a clear idea of what that's all about.
Yeah, let me explain something first to lay groundwork for that. That's a beautiful question. Do you know why we have the current calendar in the world?
I don't.
Okay, so the current calendar is called the Gregorian calendar,
Right.
as many of us know.
Right.
Now, the Gregorian calendar follows no natural cycles. The Gregorian calendar that we live on as a species literally tampers with, messes with our consciousness because it throws our natural rhythms off. The most accurate calendar to live by is the Mayan 13 moon calendar, 13 cycles of 28 days and then one extra day. That is a cosmic cyclical calendar. The Mayans were the masters of astronomy and mathematics. Now, the reason I give you this is most people listening don't know this, so we learn things and then we just carry it through generations, not even recognize that we've learned it generations ago. So back to sorcery. Yeah, many people think it as a very negative, very dark, which actually most people don't understand that. You need the dark because you have the light, you have the yin and the yang. They're both. But most people think, or many people think, sorcery is, oh, that's bad, that's black magic, that's whatever. Everything comes from source. Source is consciousness. Consciousness, physics, everything is an energy in the universe. That is source. But we tend as human beings to put a label on it saying, oh, it's this white magic or there's dark magic or the wizard or this or that. But everything is source. Everyone listening now came from source. You can take an oak tree, and that oak tree came from an acorn that was nowhere. You can take that oak tree, take an acorn from that oak tree, bury it, you've got another oak tree. You can cut them down and burn them, and it turns back into heat again, energy. Everything is a cycle from source, but we tend to put human labels on source. And everything, all of us, every thought you have, every breath you take, every fish in the ocean, every bird in the sky, and every universe there is comes from source. And so we're all sorcerers because we can bring that through us, but we don't know it as a species. But we source everything in our life, we source. But again, we think we have no power when we're extraordinarily powerful as sorcerers.
I just had a eureka moment when you were talking, when I'm thinking, well, sorcery, source, it comes from source. I love that.
Let me add there.
Yeah.
Okay, so Gary, if you ever have him on, Gary's written 4 books, and you can ask him, I'm sure he'd be on your podcast, you can ask him, Gary, where does your information come from in your books? Because I already knew the answer, but I didn't want to answer for him. One of my sister-in-laws had read Seed of the Soul, and she goes, I want to know where he gets his information from. And I said, Gary, I'm only asking because I told her I would ask, and I want your answer. Where did you get the information in your books? And he told me where he got it. And I said, Gary, you're a sorcerer. And Gary said, no, I don't think so. Like, Gary, yes, you're a sorcerer. It comes from source. Everything comes from source. And we as beings need to learn how to tap into and connect with source.
Right. And I always say every author, every composer, every artist, every screenwriter. I mean,
Rowling, J.K. Rowling, it's all source.
Please, really? I mean, yeah, all of that was channeled. All of that came from source. How could they have dreamt all that stuff up? There's more to it. And I know that you've most likely experienced what I have in writing my books, where I will write something and then I'll go back and read it later and I'll think, I don't remember writing that, but it's pretty good.
It happens when I coach all the time. I do, because I coach at 3D, because I can work with people energetically without telling them that. And when I coach, people are like, what did you say? And I'm like, I have no clue. Go back and listen to the recording because I couldn't even tell you what I said. And even like when I'm visiting with you or anyone, except my friends, normal 3D things, it just starts coming through me and I have to get out of the way. Yours is medical. Mine is not that. Mine is something different, but I just have to get out of the way and I can feel it start coming. And you can probably relate to this. Whatever comes, even if it doesn't make sense, I have to say it in the way that it comes because it's not mine. And if I try to change it going, what are you talking about, dude? It's not that. If I try to change it, then I'm changing what's coming from source. And that's what I call a lack of impeccability.
Well, and you don't know if it's going to make sense to the person with whom you're conversing, because what I have found and what I teach, Jim, is once you connect with spirit, you can do it all. I mean, we can talk to dead people, we can heal pets and people and do past life stuff and tell how close to death somebody is in the whole 9 yards. It's just been siloed. It reminds me of the medical industry where you got the neurologists and the cardiologists and the gynecologists and all of that, where you got the pet psychics and the mediums and all of that. And there are just thousands and thousands of examples I can share where I'm talking with someone and their deceased loved one. And they'll say, I had one recently, and I just thought this was so cute. I was talking with a client and her deceased son's spirit in heaven. And he said, Mom, just look for the surfboard and that'll let you know that I'm around you all the time. And she's like, the surfboard? I live in Nebraska. My son never surfed. I don't live near an ocean. What's a surfboard have to do with anything? I said, well, just be open. You may see it in a magazine. You may see it in a movie. You just never know. And then she kind of chuckled and she said, well, I do have a surfboard on my keychain. And I said, there you go.
He's with you all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's a great example of she lived in Nebraska. If I would have edited, well, that doesn't make sense. She lives in Nebraska. So I learned very early on, and I teach this, don't edit anything that you get. And it's that first thing that comes into your head.
Which you don't think about. People listening, you don't think about it because if you think about it, your analytical brain's going to get involved and you're going to mess it up. So let it come. And even though you're like, what is this? I can't say that.
Yeah.
Go with it.
Exactly. You say in order for us to create, we need to figure out if our subconscious mind is working against us. I think a great example of that is when somebody gets a medical diagnosis and they have a gut feeling that this is healable. I can use different modalities. I can learn different things, but the doctor's saying, you need to get your affairs in order because you're not going to be around much longer than maybe a few weeks or a month or two. I would think that would be a great example of how to get our minds out of the way and follow our intuition and follow where we're being led.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll tell you a story here that's not part of my official bio and all that. I am 59. When I was 55, I had not so much had a prescription in 25 years. Just never needed it. Always worked out, always been healthy. Now, Don Javier, my brother-in-law, not the Don Javier there's some guy named Don Javier on YouTube, not the same guy. My brother-in-law is shaman. You will not see shamans doing things amongst people. They hide. They're in the woodwork. You will not meet them unless they want you to meet them. But he can see. And I've had decades of experience with that. And I started noticing it was hard to breathe. February of 2019. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, it was 2019. It was hard to breathe. And I said, Dawn, I'm not feeling that great. Can you take a look and see if everything's okay? And I said, okay. In dream time. He gets everything in dream time in the ethers. And he goes, a couple of days later, he's like, you're fine. I'm like, is my heart fine? He goes, you're fine. And I've known him to be extremely accurate. February that year, I couldn't eat. I couldn't hold food down. I was having extreme anxiety. I had zero energy. I mean, I couldn't walk 100 feet without being tired. And my sister, his wife's like, you're going to the ER. So the next morning I went to the ER. They're like, you need to go to I went to Care Now. They're like, you need to go to the ER. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. Next day I went to the ER. They checked me in that day, did all their tests. The doctor walked in and goes, you're in heart failure. And my thought was, literally, I'm not exaggerating. Okay. Most people would flip out, but I knew that even when I leave the body, things are great. It doesn't matter to me. I'm at that place. And so I healed, but the doctors told me, the cardiologist told me all these things, how I'm going to be sick for a lifetime and how this is going to happen and that's going to happen. And I said, I want to hear, I didn't tell them that, but I said to me, I want to hear none of that, because they don't know the power of healing. All they know how to do is diagnose something based upon very limited science and very limited evidence. They don't understand the power of consciousness. Now, in October, I was at my brother-in-law's house. Several months later, this happened in February, I was at his house and I said, I had heart failure. And he looked at me very, very directly and said, get over that. You're healed. And now a month later, doctors don't know why I had the heart failure. A month later, I had a stroke. And the doctors don't know why that happened either. And the cardiologist, I had all these tests done again in the hospital again. And the neurologist said, you told us you had heart failure. And I said, I did. He goes, we've run all these heart tests on you. Your heart's stronger than most people's hearts. And how is that? But my point is, then the neurologist started filling my head with all these stories about this can happen and that can happen and this can, all fear-based. Not one cardiologist and not one neurologist talked about you can heal no matter what you have from source. You can heal anything when you connect into divine mind, source, quantum field, quantum dimension, woo-woo, whatever you want to call it. You can heal everything. Now, I'm sharing with people listening because there are many people that are experiencing physical things. You can heal. If you need medical attention, go get it. Please. I'm not dispensing medical advice. Go get it. But here's what I tell people, because I learned it from somebody else who was near death. Listen to the prognosis, but do not accept the diagnosis. So my diagnosis is I can stay well and healthy for the rest of my life. That's the power of consciousness.
Yeah. Well, and I get to see healings that utilize stem cells that generate new organs. And in my mind's eye, in a healing I'll watch. And I'm an inventor of surgical devices sold throughout the world and a former manufacturer of them. So oftentimes I'll see procedures that emulate what I saw in surgery for all those decades. And it used to be early on, Jim, that I would see like a kidney transplant, and I'd see the donor patient and the recipient. I'd see the diseased kidney get taken out, and the harvested donor kidney. I'd watch it get put back in. Well, then several years ago, once stem cells became part of the zeitgeist, I started seeing new organs get generated with stem cells. And I watched the diseased organ get removed, the new organ get put in, and it has shown up on scans at doctors' offices and hospitals. And I've had doctors over the years call me and say, what the hell are you doing? And how does this stuff work? And it's just spirit working through me and with me to help that person heal themselves, because nobody heals anybody else. No doctor, no healer, nobody. We all heal ourselves. No medicine, right? Right. I heard somebody say recently that the most fabulous pharmacy on the planet is in our brain. It's our brain power.
Let me add there, Julie. So I've done well over the years, and I've pretty much driven Porsches and Mercedes the last several years. And Don Javier is at my house, and I live in Sedona, a small town. We don't have anything fancy here. We have a lot of visitors, but we don't have like a Porsche dealership in Sedona. And he said to me, he goes, okay, so your Porsche, if you need something done, do you go to the Joe local mechanic, or do you go to the Porsche dealership in Scottsdale? And I said, I go to the Porsche dealership in Scottsdale. And he said, why? He said, why? I said, because they know how to work on my car. He goes, yes, they are the creators. They are the experts on your car. So when we need to heal, do we go to the mechanic locally or do we go to the source to heal? And he goes, for you to heal yourself, don't go to the local mechanic, go to source. Now, you can call that whatever you want, divine mind, God, source, whatever you want. But you probably know Bruce Lipton. I was talking to Bruce one time. He's been on my podcast. And Bruce's words were, no medication heals anyone. The only thing that will heal anyone is your consciousness, which is all source. We're vibing 100% on this.
Yeah. And it's so much fun to watch this stuff transpire. And then the docs are just going, what the heck? How does this work? And it's interesting to me, no coincidences in life, that you live in Sedona. Tell us about the energy there and why you sound like you're from Pittsburgh to me. Or where are you from originally?
I'm stopped up today, number one. I have to work on this because I tend to be the cobbler of no shoes. And that I've never had allergies till I moved to Sedona. I've lived here 5 years and I've got allergies. The weather's changing today. And my family with my brother-in-law used to come here every year on vacation. And one year he said, we're going to be needing to move to Sedona. And so my entire family moved here back in 2019. The energies here are very intense. Sedona is known as Sacred Hopi Land, and the Hopi knew it as home to the Ancient Ones, meaning the Star People. And in Sedona, you will see a lot of, with your bare eye, you will see a lot of nighttime activity that cannot be explained. So the frequencies here are higher. Candidly, it can be a very challenging place to live. I mean, you've got to be able to manage the energies. A phrase that I heard when I moved here from somebody is that Sedona will either nurture you and grow you, or it will spit you out. And I've seen that with a lot of people, because if you come here and you live here and you don't raise your frequency, you'll start slowing down and getting sicker and you don't feel good here anymore. And you've got to get out of Sedona. But that's why, because I've worked with my brother-in-law for decades, he's like, it's time to go. Now, prior to that, I'd already bought a house here. It was going back and forth to Dallas. I just resonate. So everything's energy. It's called geomancy. There are plates under the earth, under the crust, that carry certain frequencies, like in Paris and New York, and of course, it's railways and commerce. But if you've ever been somewhere and you're like, I don't know, I just feel like I'm at home. Feels good. So that's your own energy, literally connecting with the energy at that particular plate on the planet. I had the same thing happen, which I have family that has a house there as well, in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which is literally a very sacred place as well. But that's why I'm here. Technically, as my brother-in-law said, it's time for us to go, but it's also a very, very high frequency place. When I leave, I get sick.
When I've been there and I've been up on the mountaintops and that kind of stuff, and it looks like a bunch of little vortices that are spinning in the valleys, and like the Dust Devils, the old Western movies, but they're vortices. Some are bigger than other, and I can feel it, but I can also see it.
See, that's unusual. Most people, they get a sense when they're here. I can see it also, and I can feel it because I feel it like it waves coming at me when it's coming at me. It's like Jello when it comes at me. And you can see it and feel it, but most people are like, I don't know. There's something different here. And that's as far as they can go. They don't know what it is. But yeah, there's definitely this whole place like one big vortex here.
Well, and I find it fascinating too, how there are different parts of the world where that is palpable, and people like you and like me who have developed our skills. Everybody has the ability. It's just a matter of developing it and then enhancing it. But certainly where the pyramids are built, the latitude and the longitude coordinate all over the world, where a lot of these pyramids have been built, and these healing centers, and like Lourdes and France and some of the other Marian shrines and things like that. they're all built on big energy vortices that are in the land. And I find that fascinating. There's one here. I live in Birmingham, Alabama, Jim. And there's one here. And it's so funny. It's called Gravity Hill. And it's outside of town. And we were visiting somebody, my daughter-in-law's aunt, where it is her home or something. And so I got my son and my husband. I said, we're going to go to Gravity Hill, which was a few miles from where this place was, where we were for dinner. And they said, oh, come on, Mom. I said, just come with me. Let's just see what it is. And it's a hill that goes down and it ends on a state highway. And the premise is you put your car in reverse. You put your car in neutral and you're facing the highway and the car's pulled up the hill. And they were laughing at me and said, no way. So we did it and it pulled the car back up the hill, Jim, 5 miles an hour. And I thought, okay, so we did it 3 times. And my husband and my son were going, whoa, this is wild. And so, of course, I needed to scan the area. And I thought, well, there's probably some ancient burial ground up there or something. But there wasn't, there was one further down, but it was a vortex. And lots of universities have come and studied it. Even if you do a Google Maps, it's on there because so many people come to experience it. And I think that's a great example of these different energy patterns and different vortices and things that are throughout the world in different areas.
We gravitate based upon our level of consciousness to where we end up. So if we keep all of our frequency low, then we probably won't gravitate towards those places like Cheops or Machu Picchu or any of these vortexes, wherever they might be in the world. But the higher we raise our frequency, the more we're pulled to higher frequency locations, just like higher frequency people. Now, why that happens there, I don't have a clue. I have no idea, but I know that places like that on the planet do exist.
Well, and I think once somebody learns to raise their vibrational level, then they see magical things all over. I was in Ireland a couple of months ago, and I was at an 800-year-old castle. And on a morning walk, I was walking through the woods, and I just said, okay, you guys, I know you're here. Come out and say hi. And I was talking to the fairies, and they came out from the woods, and they started swarming around me, not in a bad way, just in a fun way. And then more of them came out from the ground, and they formed 6 concentric circles around me. And they were like doing Ring Around the Rosie, but they didn't do the part we all fall down. They were dancing. And so I said, I'm so glad you guys came out to say hi. And they said, well, we knew you could see us. And then they said, you're magic like us. And I thought, that's the sweetest thing anybody's ever said to me in my whole life. But what did they look like? They looked like Tinkerbell. And the men look like little leprechauns, because that's what I think they look like.
That's a great point, is that's your model of reality for you as to what they look like. But me, they might look like something else because that's my model of reality, because those dimensions are set up based upon what we can comprehend with our current reference points in the universe.
Right. So how do you incorporate that into your, what you teach? How do you incorporate, okay, it's going to be what you perceive, and what you perceive is right, because we're all taught critical thinking in school, and so many of us are worried we're going to get it wrong, and there is no getting it wrong.
Correct.
So how do you incorporate that it's going to be an individual perception thing?
Yeah, this will help a lot of people also. So Don Javier said to me one time, he goes, how come Wayne Dyer talks about me? This is about 20 years ago, about the work that I do with Don Juan. You work with Don Juan. Deepak Chopra's talked about the work. A lot of people talk about the work. You're my brother-in-law, and you don't talk about it at all, is what he said to me. That's back in around 2001. Now, where I'm going there is about just following where you're led. Now, logically, I would follow the path of only talking about shamanism or the ethereal things or sorcery, but I don't. That's why you had mentioned, it just dawned on me now, you had mentioned, not dawned that you'd mentioned, but the meaning behind it. is you talked about my background. It's in neurolinguistics, it's in hypnosis, it's in science, it's in quantum mechanics, it's in transformational psychology. How did this come together? I don't know. It just did. So the point is even in my programs, my signature program is called the Transformational Coaching Program. We don't promote any of these things that you and I are talking about at all. And the reason why, because my role in this lifetime is most of us don't know how to live in balance. We think balance is work-life balance. That is not balance. Balance is learning to integrate and balance the higher part of us with the physical 3D part of us. Most of us live all woo-woo, the higher energies, and we're broke and can't pay our bills a lot of times. And a lot of times people are sick like that. Or the majority of humanity lives in the lower, oh, my ego and my homes and my cars and my this and my title and my job and all these kind of things. We've got to integrate the higher and the lower, as above, so below, as below, so above. So I talk about a lot of things to help people function, for lack of better words, more productively in the 3D and the physical world. It's even hard to reach the physical world without, if you're living in the streets, I mean, to some degree, you know? So what I do, it's kind of like in marketing, you sell people what they want and you give them what they need. And I never set it up that way, but I set it up, let me help you create better life, better this, better that, manage your life better relationships. But in that frame, now I get to talk about the woo-woo and I get to talk about the spiritual things. Had I only promoted that way, I get a very small percentage of the marketplace. But when I talk about better quality of life, better health, better relationships, just a better quality of life, I attract more people. And then I start filtering with the energy through that. And then I tend to bring the people into my fold that I need to bring into my fold. If that makes any sense whatsoever.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And you, again, were led. Spirit was guiding you to market it in that way. And then you bring them in and then you give them a full 360 overview of everything, because you don't want somebody to be turned off by, oh, this is just woo-woo and I don't want to do it kind of a thing. But that's brilliant. And that's with my stuff too. My main spirit guide showed up and he said, you need to teach the world what happens when somebody dies, because they're so afraid. And I said, I'm a businesswoman. People think I'm nuts. I'm not doing that. Same thing. And so I thought, all right, how am I going to get that to them? Well, most people come to me for, at least on the surface, medical stuff, because they've been to a bazillion doctors and they still have the same symptoms. And then while they're there, oh, by the way, can you check my grandma who's in the nursing home and I don't think she's going to live very much longer. And we can talk to grandma's spirit, even though it's still attached to her body. And we say, okay, she's in phase 7 of the 12 phases of transition. So same thing, bring them in. People are going to meet you based on what their interests are. And then you present what we were talking about earlier. Once you connect with spirit, then you have access to all of it. And we are all a fractal of the divine. We're all part spirit. Spirit's the main part of us. And then that's the everlasting part. You, in your context coaching, I want you to say more about that. And I want you to incorporate when people feel trapped by their thoughts, their circumstance, or just what they perceive to be bad luck. How does your program help them navigate that and come out on the other side to help them design the life that they want to live?
That's an interesting question. The reason people are caught, let me go back to your question. I've never had this happen on an interview. This one's a little harder for me because the energy is different on this one, and I know it's coming from you. So it's throwing my rhythm off. So I have to keep coming back and thinking in a good way. That's all positive. So let's go back, though, because it'll tie into how I want to answer. I have found in my experience, when there is dis-ease in the body, you don't heal the body. You have to go to a higher frequency, higher resonance to heal the body. So that's your experience, I'm guessing, based upon your head nod. Okay. Now, and by the way, people listening, a lot of times I find people listen to me, but they don't, and I'm sure it happens with you, and then someone else says the same thing. I will say something and they'll listen to me, then they'll go listen to you and say, well, when she said it, it made sense. I said the same thing.
It's like kids, get that from their parents, and then they hear somebody else say, they're like, Mom, did you know?
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
Exactly. So I was just saying, because I can keep it together, but the energy and the frequency is throwing me off a little bit. But where I go with people in the transformational coaching program is everything has, I'm just going to say it in my words. This is the way that I've learned from the shamans. Stop putting so much self-importance on yourself. This container you're living in is temporary. And we think, and I've been there in my life, I've chased, I haven't, fortunately, but it doesn't mean anything anymore. The homes and the cars and the money, and I have all that stuff. Doesn't mean anything anymore, but it used to be, oh, I'm successful from my past. Meaning this is, I grew up a small town Texas farm boy. So I have these you're in the South too. I have these things and I'm rich, and doesn't mean anything. And what I've learned is we have to let go. We have like our claws into this human identity. We have to let it go. And when we do that, we automatically start letting higher frequency come through, and we heal our relationships and our life. And boom, in dream time, the clarity comes and all these kinds of things come. So you're asking me questions in a way that I thought about them, but I haven't in our time together. So many people have been in my programs, and I don't ever say, we don't promote it as healing or any of that. It's transformational. And they'll say, I was on anxiety medication, or I was on depression medication, and I'm not a doctor. I can't take them off that. And they will say, but I just stopped in the program because all of my work is about 3D. Makes no sense, but let go of the 3D. Have the 3D, and let's create more 3D, meaning the homes and the cars and the money and the gym, whatever you want, but own and attach to none of it. Now, I'm going to ask you, Julie, did that make any sense whatsoever, what I just said? Because
yeah, it does. Because what you're doing is you're helping people, and this is what I do too, you're helping people raise their vibrational level, which is where all the abundance comes in from, both the material and the health and the relationships and all of that jazz. And I always say, Jim, spirit doesn't communicate on the I feel crappy channels because the vibration's too low. So we got to get on the same frequency as spirit so that we can receive the information that's coming into us and then act on it. So that's what you're helping people do, is raise their vibrational level. And then that's when all the abundance and all of that comes in.
Let me add, yes. And let me add there is, I got to record my podcast after this one today. And something I talk about a whole lot, and it's challenging for a lot of us to get. I get my information in dream time, or it just comes to me and I just know it in the moment. But in dream time, Don Javier came to me maybe 6-7 years ago, and he said, you need to let go of attachment to everything in your life, including your own life. We never think we're attached to this container of skin that we're in. We think we're attached to the things the container owns, but we also attach to the container. And I've recognized, the Buddha said the greatest cause of suffering is attachment. And I've recognized the less you attach to, the more clarity and power that you have. And that means you can own half of the United States like Bill Gates and land. I don't care. I guess I do, but anyway, I don't. But don't attach. Don't attach to what other people say to you. Don't attach to your past. Don't attach to your ideas. Don't attach to your sentiments. Simply observe life, and then let things come to you, but don't attach and then bury yourself in things, which is what a lot of us do. Now, I don't know if that made any sense, but that's where I live from, is the peace.
Yeah. Well, and it's a learned skill because we're taught the exact opposite of that. So I believe it's a habit that we create. I could talk to you all day, but I've got one more question for you. And that is, why do we incarnate?
As I understand, number one, as many people say we have past lives, we don't have past lives. We have different lives. We only have one life, and that is the continuity of our consciousness for infinity. And then we incarnate and leave, incarnate and leave, incarnate and leave. But we attach the word attachment again to the incarnation, and we identify that to that and stay trapped in that. Now, we can also incarnate not just on this planet. We can actually go to other star systems and incarnate. And a lot of people think that incarnation is like the Buddhist philosophy. You incarnate and you climb the ladder as you incarnate. As I understand, I've been taught to me, it's not that way, because you can incarnate, but then you can leave the body and then incarnate again, but you incarnate like 3 levels below where you were in the last lifetime, because you have to go back there and learn lessons back there to go 7 steps ahead for your next incarnation. Now, as I understand, I know nothing about it, but I do, but I don't. We incarnate for the evolution of our souls. Now, people can say, well, why do we incarnate? What I've learned is that spirit, mind, and energy cannot manifest anything without also coupling with the carbon of the body, the plasma of the body. We must be in the body to grow. When we leave the body, no matter what universe that body is in, when we leave the body, we cannot actually grow. We exist till we incarnate back in a body again, have an experience in matter, and we can continue the growth. That's what's been explained to me and over the years.
Well, and I've heard from bazillions of spirits that when they're in non-physical, what I would call heaven, they think of something and it immediately materializes. Whereas why we're here is to create. And even if somebody is going through something that we would perceive from our human perspective to be horrific, in heaven, the spirits are going, cool, what's Jim going to create out of that? Wonder where he's going to go. What decision is he going to make? And all of that, which we look at and we think, well, that just is nuts. It doesn't make any sense. But when we look at it from a macro view, then we can see that, yeah, it's feasible. So it's a possibility. You are a fascinating guy, and I, on behalf of humanity, thank you for your wisdom and for being willing to share it with all of us.
And you too. I mean, you're a healer. Thank you for that.
You bet. And how can people learn more about you and your work?
So, being is a genesis of creation. Everything comes from being, whatever that being is. Last year, I created a program. I sell it, but I want to give it to your listeners. I created a program called Be, Do, Have. And you must be before you can do, before you can have. As I mentioned earlier, we're human doings. That's what we become. And we're really beings because your doing is only as effective as the doer doing the doing. And so I created this program called the Be Do Have Challenge. It's a 9-day challenge where I walk people through understanding at a profound level what it even means to be without all the dogma of being on the planet. We did change the name to the Get Unstuck Challenge because that appeals more to the ego. But it's a 9-day program. I've sold thousands for $97, and I want to give the program to people listening because they've stayed. And I want to give them something that will help them expand their existence, that'll create expansion for them so they can grow and evolve and help more people. So what they want to do is go to jimfortin.com/Julie, jimfortin.com/Julie, and they can download the program. We track all of our metrics. When we sold it, people tend not to appreciate things that are for free. That's just a reality. But when we sold it, we had a 93% completion rate after 9 days, which is really high for a challenge. So people were finding great value there, but it will help them understand the true nature of their being. And from there, we can build and create from that. So that's probably the best place I can help people out.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for your generosity. We will, of course, put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
And thank you for your time. Thank you for making time for us. I know your schedule is crazy, so I really appreciate your making time for all of us today. Everybody, that's it for today. Sending you lots of love from Sweet Home, Alabama. Mwah!
Thank you,
And
Julie.
from Arizona, too, where Jim is. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
To enhance your spiritual journey, click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share with your family and friends.